Before the compasses and charts, before latitude and longitude carved the oceans into lines of certainty, humanity looked upon the horizon with wonder and fear. The sea was both a promise and a warning, a mirror of the heavens, an endless expanse that whispered of lands unseen. In every civilization, from the riverbanks of Egypt to the ports of Phoenicia, there lived a question that transcended all borders. Where does the world end? It began not with ships, but with imagination. Long before sails caught wind, maps were drawn in the mind, in stories told by travelers and traders who vanished beyond known shores. The ancient Babylonians etched the world as a circle surrounded by cosmic waters. The Greeks, curious and restless, measured shadows to estimate the Earth's curve. And the scholars of Alexandria, centuries before any caravel touched the Atlantic, collected every scrap of knowledge, from the tides of India to the gold roots of Africa, trying to assemble a map not of places, but of understanding itself. The human desire to know, to see, to measure the unknown, it was the spark that would one day ignite the great age of exploration. But its roots were far older than any empire's ambition. They were planted in the simple act of looking outward, toward a sea without end. As centuries passed, trade became the pulse of civilization. Silk from China crossed deserts. Ivory from Africa filled the markets of Byzantium. And spices, cinnamon, pepper, clove, passed like treasure through the hands of merchants who guarded their roots as secrets. The world was connected, yet unseen. To most of humanity, the earth was still a mystery, its edges filled with dragons, gods, and myths. Then came the tools that would change everything: the magnetic compass, the astrolabe, and the ship that could survive the open ocean. Innovation turned curiosity into conquest. By the 15th century, the stage was set. Kingdoms rose on the promise of discovery, and the oceans became the new frontiers of human destiny. In the harbors of Portugal, sails gleamed in the morning sun like wings of empire. Prince Henry the Navigator, though he never sailed himself, gathered map-makers, astronomers, and captains to push beyond the known coast of Africa. Each voyage carved a new line upon parchment. The maps of that age were living things, half fact, half hope, growing with every tide. To the south, Bartolomeo Diaz faced tempests that broke ships like twigs, yet he rounded the stormy tip of Africa, the Cape of Good Hope, and returned with proof that the oceans were connected. To the east, Vasco da Gama sailed beyond that cape and reached India, linking Europe and Asia by sea for the first time. His journey redrew the map of the world, turning centuries of overland trade into a single maritime line. And in the west, another sailor, haunted by the shape of the earth and the promise of distance, convinced monarchs that he could reach the Orient by turning his back on the sunrise. Christopher Columbus set forth into a vast unknown, carrying not certainty but conviction, and in doing so, collided two worlds that had been separated since the dawn of humanity. The discovery of the Americas was not a single event, but a global transformation. It shattered old maps and created new ones. Europe's imagination exploded outward. Suddenly, the world was larger, richer, and infinitely more complex. The edge of the world had been found, and it was no edge at all, but another beginning. The 16th century became a century of maps, of ink and ambition. The great cartographers of Europe worked feverishly to record each new coastline and river mouth reported by explorers. The names of explorers and map-makers became inseparable: Magellan and Ortelius, Vespucci and Mercator. Their lines of ink were as bold as the journeys that inspired them. In 1519, Ferdinand Magellan's fleet departed Spain on a voyage that would define the Earth's true shape. Through storms, mutiny, and unimaginable hardship, his ships pressed onward, through the straits that bear his name, across the vast Pacific. a sea so endless it seemed to swallow time itself. When one ship finally returned, 3 years later, only 18 men remained from the hundreds who had left. But they carried with them something no one had ever possessed before. Proof that the world was one continuous whole. The world had been mapped, not yet in precision, but in truth. Humanity's horizon had become planetary. And in the workshops of Europe, a man named Gerardus Mercator began to draw that truth. His 1569 world map was unlike any before it. The first projection to represent the globe as a grid of navigable lines. Every sailor, every explorer could now trace a straight path across the oceans. The world's chaos was translated into geometry. Yet behind every map lay stories of those who vanished. Thousands were lost at sea, unnamed, their bones claimed by waves that never returned them. Empires rose on their courage and fell upon their greed. Exploration had brought light and shadows. It united the continents, but also began the centuries of conquest and colonization that would scar the earth. Still, the human spirit pressed onward. Beyond gold and empire, there remained a purer motive, the hunger to understand. From Lisbon to London, from Seville to Amsterdam, the age of maps became the age of measurement. Astronomers charted the stars to fix the positions of ports. Mathematicians devised systems of longitude. Instruments of brass and glass turned navigation into science. And for the first time, the oceans were no longer barriers, but bridges. The map had become the mirror of humanity's mind, expanding with knowledge, darkened by ambition, illuminated by discovery. The Earth had been circled, but not yet understood. The explorers had drawn its outline. Now, scientists and thinkers would fill its depths. The 16th century gave way to an age of instruments, compasses, and calculation. The sea became a laboratory, and the heavens a clock. The story of exploration turned inward, from conquest to comprehension. At its heart stood the great question that haunted every mariner since time immemorial. Where am I? Latitude was simple. The stars had long offered that gift. Sailors could measure the angle of the sun at noon or the height of Polaris at night, and the distance north or south could be known. But longitude, that elusive line marking east from west, remained the torment of every voyage. Without it, ships vanished into the ocean's ambiguity, unable to tell how far they had drifted. Empires lost fleets not to war, but to miscalculation. Then came the age of precision. Across Europe, royal observatories rose like temples of reason. In England, the Royal Greenwich Observatory was built not for glory, but for certainty, a place to measure time itself. The heavens were charted with an accuracy never before imagined. Astronomers such as Tycho Brahe, Johannes Kepler, and Galileo Galilei redrew humanity's place within the cosmos. The same revolution that mapped the stars also refined the maps of the Earth. To measure longitude, one had to measure time, for the Earth turned 15 degrees each hour. If a sailor could carry an exact clock from one port to another, he could compare the difference between local noon and the clock's time, and thus calculate his position east or west. But at sea, clocks faltered. The pendulum failed with the ship's motion, springs rusted, mechanisms warped in salt and heat. It was a craftsman, not a scholar, who would solve it. In the 18th century, an English carpenter named John Harrison built the first true marine chronometer, a clock that kept perfect time even across the violent motion of oceans. His invention transformed navigation forever. For the first time, longitude could be known, and the world, once guessed, became measurable. Now every captain's cabin held the instruments of empire: compass, sextant, chronometer, and chart. The oceans became grids of latitude and longitude, the winds became predictable, and trade routes spanned the globe like arteries of civilization. The age of exploration evolved into the age of empire, when the map ceased to be a mystery and became a weapon. In this new order, maps were no longer just guides. They were declarations. Each boundary inked upon parchment was a claim, a line of power that could divide continents or unite them. From the Dutch masters of cartography to the Spanish chroniclers, every coastline drawn became part of a grander competition, the race to possess the earth itself. Amsterdam became the cartographic capital of the world. The House of Bleu printed atlases so detailed and ornate, they were called the theaters of the world. In the candlelit workshops of Europe, so ieder feet der be, artisans pressed copper plates and brushed pigments across the continents. Seas were filled with ships and monsters. Winds were personified as divine faces. Every page was both art and argument, a statement that the world, once divine and infinite, could now be owned, measured, and sold. Yet, even as the old world reached outward, a new vision began to rise. One not of conquest, but of curiosity. In the heart of Paris, at the Académie des Sciences, philosophers and explorers gathered to question what the map still concealed. If the Earth had been circumnavigated, what of its depths and heights, its poles and unseen currents? The blank spaces on the map were shrinking, but they still whispered of wonder. In 1768, the British Admiralty launched an expedition aboard a modest ship named Endeavour. Its commander, Captain James Cook, was tasked not with war, but with science, to observe the transit of Venus across the Sun, and to map the uncharted southern seas. Cook's voyages redefined the very purpose of exploration. From Tahiti to New Zealand, from the Great Barrier Reef to the coasts of Antarctica, his careful surveys transformed vague speculation into precise geography. For the first time, exploration served the progress of all humankind. The logs of Cook's voyages became blueprints for future cartography. His maps were so accurate they would remain in use for centuries. He sailed not only with sailors, but with botanists, artists, and astronomers, men who recorded the natural world in exquisite detail, capturing the flora, fauna, and cultures of places Europe had never known, but discovery carried its burden. Every new line on the map meant contact, and contact meant consequence. Disease, trade, and colonization followed in the wake of exploration. The world was no longer distant. It was intertwined for better and for worse. As the 18th century ended, the world map had become nearly complete. Yet its completion revealed another truth: that knowledge, once pure, could be wielded as power. The map was both a triumph of reason and a mirror of human ambition. In the century to come, it would evolve again, from a navigator's tool to a scientist's instrument, from empire's claim to humanity's mirror. For the next great voyages would not be across the oceans, but across the very fabric of the planet itself, charting mountains, rivers, and even the invisible lines of magnetism that bound Earth's field. The age of exploration had changed what it meant to know the world. But its greatest legacy was yet to come: the birth of a truly global understanding, where every discovery became a shared chapter in humanity's collective map. The map of the Earth was nearly drawn, yet its spirit was not complete. Beyond the measured seas and colonial coasts, vast inner worlds awaited, mountains unscaled, deserts unexplored, rivers that disappeared into silence. The 18th century had conquered longitude. The 19th would conquer the land itself. It began with questions older than empire. What lay at the heart of Africa, beneath the burning equatorial sun? What formed the white void of Antarctica, where the compass lost its pull? What paths did the great rivers of Asia carve through their timeless valleys? The age of exploration was reborn, not in the name of gold or glory, but of knowledge. From Europe's lecture halls and observatories, Expeditions were launched with notebooks instead of cannons. Men of science replaced conquistadors, though they faced the same storms, thirst, and unknown. The Enlightenment had given birth to a new breed of explorer: geographers, naturalists, ethnographers, whose mission was to understand, not to conquer. Among them stood the towering figure of Alexander von Humboldt, the man who would give nature a map. Between 1799 and 1804, Humboldt and his companion Aimé Bonpland crossed the jungles and volcanoes of South America. They climbed Chimborazo, thought then to be the highest mountain in the world, and from its slopes, Humboldt saw the Earth as a living whole, a single organism, every climate, plant, and current connected. His notes and sketches became the foundation of modern geography and ecology. His Cosmos, a vast work of science and philosophy, redefined how humanity saw the planet. Not as a collection of territories, but as an interwoven system. For Humboldt, mapping the Earth meant understanding its heartbeat. Inspired by his vision, explorers across the world took up the same torch. In Africa, David Livingstone traced the courses of the Zambezi and the Congo, seeking the source of the Nile, a mystery that had haunted cartographers since Herodotus. When Livingstone disappeared into the interior, the world waited in suspense. Years later, journalist Henry Morton Stanley found him in the town of Ujiji, uttering the immortal words, "Dr. Livingstone, I presume," but behind that famous greeting lay the echo of centuries, the meeting of curiosity and endurance that defined the human quest to know. Meanwhile, in the icy realms of the north, ships braved the Arctic to find the fabled Northwest Passage, a maritime shortcut between Europe and Asia through the frozen labyrinth of Canada's islands. Dozens of expeditions vanished into the polar night. Among them, Sir John Franklin's doomed voyage became legend. His ships Erebus and Terror trapped in ice, their crews lost to cold and hunger. Yet even tragedy served the map. Every search party that followed traced new coastlines, turning myth into geography. Far to the south, others sought the White Continent itself. In 1820, the first confirmed sighting of Antarctica unveiled a world of eternal ice, a continent larger than Europe, untouched since creation. It was both beautiful and forbidding, the final frontier of the Earth's map. In Asia, the Silk Road's forgotten corridors drew explorers eastward once again. Russian and British surveyors, driven by both science and suspicion, mapped Central Asia during the Great Game, that shadowy rivalry of empire between Moscow and London. Across deserts and mountains, they traced caravan routes and ancient oases, rediscovering lost cities like Samarkand and Bukhara, names once whispered in the tales of Marco Polo. Yet even as borders hardened, the map revealed something far greater than politics. The deeper humanity looked into the Earth, the more it saw its unity. The great rivers, the Nile, the Amazon, the Yangtze, were lifelines of civilization. The mountain chains, the Andes, the Himalayas, the Alps, were the bones of continents. The winds and currents tied the oceans together like unseen roads. The map was becoming alive, a breathing portrait of the planet's soul. By the mid-19th century, cartography had become an art of precision and wonder. Engravers etched mountain ranges in delicate shading, coastlines curved with mathematical beauty. Atlases became symbols of progress, the world captured in copper and ink. Yet every map still carried mystery, every blank space a whisper of the unknown. It was an era of expedition and endurance. From the Himalayas to the Amazon, from the Australian interior to the Arctic Circle, humanity marched to the rhythm of discovery. But behind the adventure lay a deeper revolution, one that would change the way people saw not only the Earth, but themselves. For with each new line drawn upon parchment, the world grew smaller and humanity closer. The map that once divided had begun to unite. Roads, telegraph lines, and sea cables followed the paths of explorers, weaving the first threads of global connection. Steamships replaced caravels. Railways replaced caravans. Geography became destiny, and the map, the mirror of modern civilization. But even as the last frontiers faded, one great mystery endured: how to map the invisible. The Earth was measured, but its depths, its forces, climates, and unseen patterns remained unknown. The next explorers would not ride horses or ships, but instruments, telescopes, thermometers, and seismographs. They would map not what could be seen, but what could be sensed. The story of exploration was evolving once again, from the discovery of lands to the discovery of laws, from the charting of rivers to the charting of knowledge itself. And as the 19th century turned to the 20th, the ancient dream of the map, to hold the world in human understanding, was finally complete. But what it revealed was not domination, but dependence. The Earth was not something to be claimed. It was something to be cared for. The age of exploration had begun with conquest. It ended with comprehension. The world had been mapped, but in doing so, humanity had discovered itself. The story of the map did not end when the explorers put down their compasses. In truth, it was only beginning. For the map, that simple drawing of lines, rivers, and coastlines, had always been more than an image of the Earth. It was a reflection of the human mind itself. It recorded not just where we were, but who we were becoming. When the age of exploration faded into the dawn of modern science, the globe transformed from a mystery into a measure. The deep oceans, once thought endless, revealed their mountain chains, trenches, and plains through echo sounding and early sonar. The continents, once seen as ancient, unchanging masses, became living plates drifting over molten seas, a discovery that turned the world from static to alive. In observatories and laboratories, explorers no longer set sail upon the waves but upon equations. The astronomers mapped the heavens to chart the Earth, and the physicists mapped time itself. From Newton's gravity to Darwin's voyage aboard the Beagle, the spirit of exploration moved inward, from territory to truth. But though the sails were lowered and the caravels turned to steam, the soul of the map endured. The map had once been the weapon of kings. Now it became the language of humankind. Railways and telegraph lines stitched the continents together. The first global time zones were drawn so that the world might share a single heartbeat. And in that rhythm, the pulse of humanity began to echo as one. The seas that had once separated empires became highways of exchange. The borders that had once defined nations began to blur under trade, science, and shared knowledge. Knowledge. From the ashes of competition rose connection, and from conquest, comprehension. By the dawn of the 20th century, the last white spaces of the Earth had vanished from the atlases. The world, for the first time, was completely known. But the human need to explore could not be silenced. When the map of the Earth was full, we began to draw new ones, of the skies above and the atoms within. Cartography evolved again, into astronomy, geology, genetics, and digital data. Humanity learned to map the invisible, the paths of wind and weather, the pulse of the oceans, the glow of galaxies billions of light years away. Each new discovery was a continuation of the same instinct that drove the sailors of Portugal, the traders of Samarkand, the scholars of Alexandria. The map had become not a picture of the world, but a portrait of curiosity itself, and yet, beneath every satellite image and digital grid, the same ancient lines remain, the faint echo of ink on parchment, of hands that once trembled over blank horizons. For behind every frontier stands the same question that stirred the hearts of those who came before. What lies beyond? In this quiet question lives the eternal spirit of exploration. It was there when Polynesian navigators read the stars across the Pacific, when Arab scholars charted the heavens from the deserts of Baghdad, when Chinese mariners sailed beyond the South China Sea, when the compass needle first pointed north. It was there when da Gama reached India, when Magellan crossed the Pacific, when Humboldt measured the breadth of the Andes. It is there still, in every child who looks at a globe and wonders what the world feels like beyond the edge of their own sky. And so, the story of maps is the story of memory, of the way humanity sought to place itself within the universe, every coastline traced, every river named, every star recorded. All of it a testament to the same desire, to belong to something vast, to understand our place within creation. Today, our maps glow with light. Satellites orbit silently above, watching every mountain, every wave, every street. The world that once took centuries to measure can now be seen in an instant. Yet the wonder remains unchanged. For in the end, it was never just the world we were mapping. It was ourselves. From the first cave drawings of rivers and stars to the shimmering blue of a digital Earth, the journey has always been inward. Through time, through discovery, through imagination. The age of exploration may have ended, but the age of understanding has just begun. The Earth, once a mystery of uncharted seas and unnamed lands, now stands as a shared home, fragile, precious, and beautifully known. And in every contour of a map, every mountain shadow, every ocean line, every coordinate of memory, lies a story of courage, of wonder, and of the boundless human will to seek. The world was never truly discovered. It was remembered. For when we mapped the Earth, we found what we had been searching for all along: the reflection of our own humanity, endless, curious, and ever reaching toward the horizon.